Hey gang, Patrick King here, back with my good friend Bigfoot, and we've got a question today that comes in from Shelly. Shelly says, I've had a new dressage horse for a bit now, and I'm thinking that working on dressage is great for me, but I gotta tell you, when I don't hold him together, he's not got a lot of self-carriage. For example, when I ride him on a loose rein, he'll sometimes give me a 4-beat canter. Do you have any suggestions on how to get him more self-carriage, or even just balance, while he's on his own? So that's actually something that I see fairly commonly, is our horses that are not really physically developed into maybe what we might call the stage where they're ready to do more than, or more of what we're actually asking them to do when it comes to their balance. Now, when we're talking about balance and self-carriage, we want to think about the horse's balance by himself, and then the balance with us. When we sit on the horse, we're adding more weight to the front end. Studies have shown that the horse carries about 2/3 of the weight of the tack and the rider on the shoulders. This inherently unbalances a horse. When we talk about self-carriage is not the idea of just letting him go out there and hang out on a long rein. That might be a horse carrying himself, but that's not necessarily self-carriage. Self-carriage means that in spite of the weight of the rider and the tack, the horse is carrying himself in his natural balance, which means he's going to have to shift some weight to his haunches in order for that to happen. So self-carriage itself takes a mild degree of actual collection, in other words, more weight shifting to the haunches than what we can typically offer just by letting the horse hang around on his own, as far as long slack reins. So to get a little bit more specific with Shelly's question, what she's talking about is that when she allows her horse to go around on his own, he gets into a heavy forehand basically and a 4-beat canter. I want to think a little bit about the contact that we take when we do take up our contact, and then I've got a couple tips on helping a horse to develop better balance and engagement for that self-carriage. An important thing to think about, when we take up on our reins, in spite of the fact that I'm going to hold a contact, my horse needs to come up into that contact. Any amount of pulling that we do on the rein is only going to cause the horse to come heavier on the forehand. Any amount of bracing on the bars of the mouth or on the nose, if we're pulling, draws the horse's sternum or draws his chest closer down to the ground. And that's the opposite of self-carriage. That's putting a horse heavier onto the forehand. So we want to think about our contact whenever we ask for it. And sometimes it means breaking things down even to the standstill, to where if I pick up and take my contact, you see how Bigfoot starts to lift a little bit, the base of his neck here, and soften into the rein. It's not that I'm pulling him up into this, it's that I'm adjusting where the bit hangs in front of me or in front of his chest, and he's adjusting to that. We talk a lot about the bit being like a ballet bar for a ballerina. It's a point of reference for the contact. If we allow the bit to hang out here, that point of reference is far out here. If we draw the bit farther back here, or closer to us, or closer to the chest, then the horse comes to that point of contact, that point of reference for their balance. If they're hanging on that, that's not the point of a ballet bar, right? It's that point of reference. They're not supposed to be doing pull-ups on it. They're not supposed to be leaning on it. But it's also not supposed to be something hot or electrified for them to be afraid of, right? And that's when we get a horse we'd call behind the bit or evading the bridle. So when I pick up on my reins, I want to feel my horse lift, again, the base of the neck here. So once we've got that established, and that might be something that takes several sessions for your horse to understand, once we've got that idea of our contact there, then we're going to start to get to work. One of the most important things for a horse that's heavy on the forehand is going to be lots and lots of frequent transitions. So let's say I'm just going to let Bigfoot here scramble on the forehand. He really likes to stretch. He really likes to lengthen his neck and lower his head to the ground. And for the most part, he carries good balance. But when I allow him to do this in the canter, he definitely tips forward in the balance. That's a fitness thing. A horse has to have a certain amount of fitness in order to be able to carry a reach and a stretch forward in the canter without getting too heavy on the forehand. So this is going to all depend on your horse's current level of fitness and his understanding of your aids and what you're asking. So let's say I ask him here into the trot, And Shelley's question was specifically about canter. So what I'm going to do is I'm riding Bigfoot around here at the trot. I'm going to play with the speed of the trot. I'm going to ask him to come here a little quicker by engaging my seat a little bit more, encouraging a little bit more. And then I might slow my seat down and ask him to come a bit slower. And when he comes slower, you see him start to reach a little bit more down in the neck. And then I'll say, okay, great. Let's add a little more energy. So transitions, when we make them, aren't necessarily, say, trot to canter transitions. They can be transitions within the gait itself. We've got a good trot here, and now I'll slow my seat and come down into a slower trot. And then I'll pick that back up again. This is something that we're going to do in canter to help our horse develop a little better balance also. Now I'm going to pick up the trot here and allow him to tip into the canter. And we notice that when he did that, he started a little bit to lift up the base of his neck. There. Now we might say, let's go with a little more energy. There. And we see him start to lift the neck slightly. Good. And now I'll slow my seat. We'll come to a bit slower canter, and you see where he goes. So sometimes, Shelley, for your horse and for anyone else's horse out there, sometimes to get that balance, to get that impulsion for the self-carriage, we need to pick up a little more energy. Good. And now we slow and come to trot. Now all of this is playing with our gaits, playing with our transitions without having to haul on our reins. Once our horse is understanding the idea of following our seat, then we start to talk about connecting our reins. We start out connected a bit longer here, and then gradually, as your horse understands, then I start to lift the base of his neck. There. As the base of the neck lifts, more weight draws to the haunches. Good. This is a lot about the horse engaging the serratus muscle that connects the last few vertebrae of the neck and the first 8 or 9 ribs. It's the serratus muscle that lifts the withers, that lifts the front end. When we have sufficient balance and drive from behind, the serratus muscle can do its thing, can work its magic, and help lift the horse into better balance. From here, canter, and I can lift the base of his neck by adjusting my seat, keeping the energy from behind, and lifting, feeling a slight lift connection onto the reins. Again, if I let him go out on that long rein, we see where he wants to go. He wants to go flat. When we have this idea of the horse carrying himself and lifting the base of his neck in relation to the bridle, when we adjust our reins in this way, you can see I'm not helping him stay here. I'm not babysitting by holding the reins tight. This is where we can help to adjust our horse's balance. Good job. The biggest piece that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about engagement, self-carriage, balance, the horse needs to carry himself, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's self-carriage. We want to think about him responding to the bridle in a way that he positions himself. We're not pulling him up into that. He's following that feel. Sometimes we need to do a lot of work from the ground in order to help that. Now, some other things that are really great for your horse for getting better balance, getting better self-carriage, are things like trot pulls, cavalettis, small jumps. I think every horse, regardless of their discipline, I don't care if he's a reiner or a cutter or a jumper or a dressage horse or a polo pony, to develop proper balance, it's really important for us to do a lot of this cross-training stuff. Every horse, regardless of discipline, should have a few days a month at least, maybe one day a week, where they're jumping. Every horse should have time each week where they're going out across country. We've got lots of rolling hills and fields out here, lots of trails where they've got to use their body. They've got to think about what they're doing. That's priceless. Too often we get too discipline specific. We get really stuck in the idea of what we're doing with our horse, and our dressage horse might only ever see a dressage arena. That's the fastest way to beat that horse's body up and break him down. Getting out in the country, going and doing different things, that's really important for that horse to learn to use his body in a better way. So hopefully this is helpful for you, Shelley, and for anybody else out there who's looking for some tips on helping your horse to develop better balance, better self-carriage. If you found this important, please feel free, give us a comment in the comment section below the video. Feel free, if you've got a friend that might need this advice or insight, tag them or share the video directly with them. Don't forget, gang, you keep asking questions and we'll keep talking about horses. Thanks so much.